2. Preview. Focus on the main idea. The first civilizations in ancient Egypt were great and complex. Places: Giza, Deir el-Medina. People: Menes, Manetho, Khufu, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten. Vocabulary: Unify, Pharaoh, Hieroglyphics, Pyramid, Mummy, Economy. Terms: Rosetta Stone. Life in Egypt. You are there. You're waiting for your brother to return home from school. He is learning to be a scribe, a person who keeps written records. He is older than you are, and your parents have only enough money to send one of you to school. You cannot wait for him to share with you what he learned today. You look forward to the day when you and maybe your older sister will be scribes. When your brother arrives, he bursts out with the latest news in the kingdom. Upper Egypt, where you live, is being united with Lower Egypt. This means that the king will have an even bigger responsibility. The streets in your village are buzzing. You hear rumors that the king will be given a new, special title. Target skill. Summarize. As you read, summarize the main points about life in ancient Egypt. Unifying Egypt. As you read in Lesson 1, farming emerged in the Nile River Valley in Upper and Lower Egypt. Both kingdoms had their own kings. These kings even wore their own special crowns. The king of Upper Egypt wore a white crown, and the king of Lower Egypt wore a red one. When the two kingdoms were unified or united into one country, the two different colored crowns were united into one crown. Look at the diagram to see how the single crowns became a double crown after Egypt was unified. Legend says that in about 3150 BC, King Menes led his army north into Lower Egypt, wearing the double crown. No one is certain if this is true. Some historians believe that other kings named Scorpion or Narmer could have united the two kingdoms. It is hard to know exactly what happened because archaeologists have found few records from the period. During the first dynasty, or period of time during which members from the same family ruled, Memphis was made Egypt's capital city. However, we do not know much about kings and life in Egypt until the third dynasty. That is when Manetho, who was a priest and an advisor, began to keep records. He divided the kings into different dynasties. Later, historians made three main divisions in ancient Egypt. The Old Kingdom, circa 2575 to 2181 BC. The Middle Kingdom, circa 2040 to 1782 BC. And the New Kingdom, circa 1570 to 1070 BC. During the New Kingdom, people began to refer to a king as a god king, or pharaoh, which means great house, as described on a tomb. A pharaoh is a god by whose dealings one lives, the father and mother of all, without an equal. The Egyptians considered the pharaoh to be related to Amun-Ra, the sun god. They worshipped the pharaoh as a god. Review. Why do we not know for certain who united Upper and Lower Egypt? Main idea and details. Egyptian records. We know about the pharaohs because of the records Egyptians kept. Like the Sumerians, the Egyptians developed a form of writing based on pictures called hieroglyphics, or sacred carvings. Unlike Sumerian cuneiform writing, these hieroglyphics represented objects or ideas, but also stood for sounds. They could be carved into a clay or stone tablet, or written on paper. Archaeologists did not know how to read the hieroglyphics they found on Egyptian buildings and artifacts for a long time. The discovery and later decoding of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 solved the mystery. On the stone was a passage written in Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and a form of Egyptian cursive writing. By comparing Egyptian hieroglyphics to Greek words, the Rosetta Stone could be read. Now we know that the Egyptians used at least 700 different hieroglyphic symbols. Pharaohs depended on priests and officials like Manetho to keep written records. Scribes traveled around the kingdom. They recorded information such as how much wheat was harvested and how many taxes farmers owed to the government. Today, archaeologists rely on these records to understand ancient Egyptian civilization. Review. What are Egyptian hieroglyphics, and how are they different from Sumerian picture writing? Compare and contrast. D.K. Dorling Kindersley Eyewitness Book. Egyptian writing. Scribes used about 700 different signs or pictures in hieroglyphic writing. The ancient Egyptians made sure that their writing system was difficult so that few people could learn it. Hieroglyphs could be written from left to right, right to left, or top to bottom. Why do you think the Egyptians wanted only a few people to learn how to write? Script. Scribes usually wrote religious or official documents on papyrus in a fast form of writing called hieratic. On this papyrus, hieratic appears as script. Hieroglyphs appear above the picture. Label. Scribes used tags to label their scrolls. A translation of this tag from about 1450 BC explains that the papyrus scroll told a story about a fig tree. Pyramid building. Egyptian kings in the Old Kingdom are best known for the huge structures they built. Pyramids. These large stone buildings served as houses or tombs for the dead. The Egyptians believed that kings, pharaohs, remained gods even after death, and that pyramids were like palaces. Kings were buried with their possessions. The Egyptians thought that kings took their possessions with them to the afterlife, or life that continued after death. Because the afterlife was more important than life on earth, the Egyptians took great care in preparing kings for burial. They believed the bodies of the pharaohs needed to be preserved. They used a process called mummification. Mummification took 70 days. First, the Egyptians removed all organs, except for the heart, from the body. Then they rubbed oils and perfumes over the body. Next, they wrapped the body in linen bandages. Finally, the mummy, or preserved body, was placed in a coffin and put into a tomb. Before the Egyptians built pyramids, they constructed mastabas, or benches, as tombs. However, when King Zoser became king, he hired an advisor, much like an architect, to build a step pyramid. Kings continued to follow this custom of pyramid building. The building of Egypt's largest pyramid began about 2600 BC at Giza. It is called the Great Pyramid, built for the pharaoh Khufu. Archaeologists and historians estimate that this pyramid took about 20 years to build, and that slave labor was not used. Until the 1800s, the Great Pyramid was the tallest structure in the world made by people. When the Nile was flooding, farmers could not work in their fields. They were then available to work on the pyramid. Perhaps as many as 20,000 workers used more than 2 million blocks of heavy stone to build it. They cut the gigantic blocks of granite from cliffs to the south. Then, some believe, they dragged the stones with rope to ramps that led to the building site. Review. Why and how did the Egyptians build pyramids? Main idea and details.